Thanks. I'm calling to order the April 3rd meeting of the Auburn Select Board. This open meeting of the Town of Auburn Select Board is being conducted both in person and remotely, consistent with Chapter 107 of the
This
Acts of
conference
2022.
will now be recorded.
Which suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed to participate remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For the public to join the meeting remotely by telephone, dial 408-650-3123 and with access code 235-235-861. Or the public can join via computer at global.gotomeeting.com/join/235-235-861. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Please note that this meeting is being recorded by Auburn Cable Television. Is there anyone in the audience also recording? Seeing none, could you please rise if you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have someone signed up for public comment, Mr. Richards. If you would like to come up and... Oh, yeah, no problem. Could you just give us your name and address, please?
Sure. My name is Eric Richards. I live on Ravine Drive in Auburn.
Great.
So, pretty simple. I'm here to request an agenda item on your next meeting for a discussion about a DLS audit.
Sure. We can put an agenda item on for a DLS audit.
Awesome.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. Thank you so much. We have no community organizations, we have no presentations or public hearings, we have no departmental items, we have no communications. We are on number 8A. We have no proclamations or recognitions. We have no gift acceptances. And we are on 8C, a discussion with town council regarding a town-instituted moratorium on 40B projects. I'm going to turn it over to our town council.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's no none after that item number that...
Unfortunately.
Well, Madam Chair, good evening, and members of the board, good evening. As you recall, you presented to us, to my office and myself, a series of questions back at the end of February, which asked for various thoughts and various comments on the questions you had presented, and I think you had presented roughly 7 questions. We've provided an opinion letter, and we have tried to break those questions down into their various components and try to address each one of them to try to answer what your questions are and what your concerns are. We did take the liberty of somewhat rephrasing the questions a little bit, you'll see, in the beginning, just so that we could get a clearer understanding, or at least frame the question so that you'd understand what we were trying to answer. And each one of those, we've provided a separate answer for them. There are some questions that appeared to be a duplicate and required kind of similar answers, so I apologize for that, but really the gist of it is really the same in answering those particular questions. So do you want me to go through each one, or are there particular questions for each area, or how would you like me to proceed, Madam Chair?
How would the board like to proceed with this?
I'm okay.
I'd like to not necessarily read this or verbatim, but just a high level, synopsis of, I can read, yes, we can do it, but we have some concerns. I just want to, high level and not read verbatim. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts.
That sounds great.
That high-level analysis comes down really to one particular phrase, and it appears in the Millbury, I gave you a citation to the town of Millbury, attempt to do a moratorium like this, or like what's being proposed. And the gist of it is that the Millbury proposal, which was passed, was presented by citizens petition, voted at town meeting, but went to the Attorney General's office for their statutory review as a zoning bylaw. It was denied because there was no discernible legitimate zoning purpose that could be found in the moratorium that was presented. And that's a theme that I think you'll see, we tried to carry over throughout the entire opinion letter that we gave you. When you talk about authority, yes, you have the authority to do it, but there has to be a legitimate zoning purpose for doing it. When you talk about are there any consequences, there are consequences if you don't have a legitimate zoning purpose to what you're trying to do. And those can be legal scrutiny, obviously, as was done by the Millbury, by the AG in the Millbury situation. There were a few, we did try to provide you with some, you were asked if there were some towns that did have zoning moratoriums allowed. We presented, we found at least four, I think, or five that we presented. One was the town of Shrewsbury, one was the town of Needham, one was the town of Carver. All of those were a little bit more residential, but there was a bigger one back with the town of Amherst that we presented that I think really is the roadmap for how we want to proceed, or how you would want to proceed if you were going to continue along the road of looking to how to get a moratorium. And that would be, you need to have that background information. You need to have that pre-study information. The AG's office has come out with opinions that said you don't necessarily need to have a full-blown study prior to it, but you have to have a problem. You have to identify what the issue is. You have to identify whether it's a growth issue, a infrastructure issue, if there is some basis for why you want to put a pause to everything in order to proceed with. And with that, that's where the AG's office comes down and continually says, if you do not have a discernible, legitimate zoning purpose, then you're not going to satisfy the Attorney General's scrutiny. The only comment I'd make is, with terms of some of the legal cases that we presented, this is on page 7. There's a case in there that's called Zuckerman versus Hadley. And this is a case you're going to see referenced almost in any opinion letter from the Attorney General's office about moratoriums. And I just want to highlight what this case says. This case articulated clear limits on the municipal power to adopt a moratorium. And this is quoting now from the court. Except when used to give communities breathing room for periods reasonably necessary for the purposes of growth planning generally or resource problem solving specifically, as determined by the specific circumstances of each case. Such, in this case a moratorium, zoning ordinance do not serve a permissible public purpose and therefore are unconstitutional. That's the framework upon which any moratorium has to work within in order for it to succeed. And that's really the 30,000 square foot, 30,000 height view that I have of what I tried to say in the opinion and for all of the problems that might exist in trying to do this.
If I may ask.
Of course.
So again, reasonable timelines and stuff. What, is there a theme on the timelines? Is it 6 months, a year, 2 years? Like, is there, again, reasonable time? I don't know what it would take for each aspect of it, but is there a definition of what reasonable is and what needs to be accomplished?
It would have to be defined, as the court in Zuckerman said, on each individual case as to what is being determined as necessary and what is what does the town believe it's going to take to get that particular goal accomplished? So it could be 6 months is probably a short time on the low side. A year might be on the high side, with exceptions maybe to go an additional 30 days, 60 days, or whatever.
So if a moratorium was accomplished or asked for and received, and we found deficiencies, does that extend the moratorium, or?
I'm sorry, deficiencies in what?
So let's say there's an infrastructure problem, and we don't know what it is yet, and we're looking at infrastructure, and that's a basis for a moratorium, is we need to fully understand the capacities of our system. So if we discover an issue, but the moratorium was for 12 months, but this issue is going to take several years to solve, does that extend the moratorium?
No, I would think you'd have to go back to town meeting and seek an amendment to that zoning amendment that you've passed to get the moratorium. You'd have to go back and seek additional time.
So essentially, the moratorium would be for us to fact-find or
Can be.
better understand?
It can be. There should be a basis for the fact-finding, is what I would like to emphasize, too, is that you can't, I wouldn't advise you going in and saying, we want a moratorium to fact-find. I would rather see someone say, because of A, B, C, and D, we are looking for a moratorium to fact-find further on this issue and to kind of come up with some kind of a comprehensive plan as to what's going on.
Yep.
Madam Chair, thank you for the detailed letter. I have a couple general questions, then some more sort of pointed questions. The first is, my understanding was that when zoning bylaws are passed by town meeting, they have to get Attorney General review before they go into effect. We heard at the last meeting that one of our consultants for our zoning board of appeals that deals with 40B stated to the ZBA that they go into effect immediately and are only pulled back if the AG turns them down. Which way is it?
I would disagree with that last opinion and would say the AG would say nothing goes into effect until I review it.
Okay, that's how I always understood it as well. Thank you. The other question I have, in your document, you referenced the need for a 2/3 vote for zoning change. I thought that there was legislation under former Governor Baker that made it, for zoning changes related to housing, made it a majority vote.
Only in certain instances. Those are defined by, by statute, and Mr. Menard sent me an opinion on that, and you have some of those items on the warrant, which are going to be zoning changes that will be able to be passed by simple majority, and there are some that require a 2/3. But it's all set by statute in the language of the statute that amended 40B-5 to do that, yes.
So if we were to do a moratorium, would that have to pass by a 2/3, or would that have to pass by a majority?
2/3.
2/3, okay. So now for my more sort of pointed questions in terms of where I personally think this should go, or may have the most success going, is that based on your letter, based on some of my own research, it seems that, and I've said this numerous times, people are probably sick of hearing it, the reason why we're in this situation is we're paying for the short-sightedness of our forefathers. And I'm not just talking about, when I say that, I'm now just not talking about 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 20 years ago. I'm now talking about 8 years ago. So I went to the housing production plan of 2024, the one that we just passed. And then I went to our last one of 2017. And in 2017, about 2/3 of the goals and strategies we have in the 2024 were in the 2017 that we never acted upon, including things like looking at doing inclusionary zoning, looking at doing other zoning changes to identify areas within the part of town and make them more attractive to developers, so that you wouldn't necessarily stop a development from going into a residential area, but you would entice them to look at those areas that the town has decided where we want to see infill housing, multifamily housing, and those types of things. but we never acted upon it. We never went and did our zoning changes. We never took a step back and said, okay, based on our zoning bylaw, here's where we need changes in order to make our housing production plan real and put them into effect. So looking at the Amherst case and some others, it seems, in my view, that the best way for us to get a moratorium is to say, we have this housing production plan. We have these strategies and goals regarding zoning changes. We need breathing room to make those changes in our zoning bylaw, and we're requesting a moratorium for, I think Amherst only did 6 months, I would say a year, maybe. They have more resources than we do. Is that something that, based on all the information you see here, that you think would pass the sniff test that the AG is going to say in terms of reasonable time, an identified deficiency or identified issues regarding our zoning bylaw? We have the housing production plan that we want to put into effect that will then work towards our commitment to regional housing as well as local housing on an affordable side. And we need that breathing room to put those puzzle pieces in place so that we can move forward.
Not trying to second-guess the Attorney General or how she will answer this particular question, and I know you're not asking me to. My initial reaction to that would be a question of where have you been for the last 8 years? That's the argument. And so that doesn't help you. But having that as a framework for maybe what you would like to have done going forward doesn't hurt you. But you're asking a lot for the Attorney General to separate an existing, let me say, attempt to avoid 40B housing versus a legitimate zoning purpose. And there's a balance there that the AG would have to reach. My guess, if I'm going to look at it sitting here today, she's going to probably look more at the Zuckerman case that I told you said that this does not pass the sniff test. That would be my reaction.
Even though it's modeled after what Amherst did.
I get it.
And for the record, I'm not trying to avoid 40B. I think we need every kind of housing, workforce housing, affordable housing, truly affordable housing. My criticism for 40B is that 80% AMI is not actually affordable. I want to see lower. But, when I look at the sniff test, I think that's the closest we can get. Going to the resources or the lack of infrastructure, I don't think we have a good chance of that. And the reason why is because we have the Water District on record at numerous hearings saying they have the capacity, and they just did a connection to Worcester to create excess capacity that can fill the current need and future needs. I asked the question of our sewer director at the last meeting, do we have a capacity issue? And his answer was no, not that he's aware of, although he's doing an asset management plan, but he said there was no flow issue. So I think that, the AG is going to look at our meeting minutes and say that argument's not kosher. So in my opinion, with the board, if our fellow board members are exploring this and committed to this, I think our best goal is to follow the Amherst model, which is to say, we recognize the need for affordable housing. We recognize the need for multifamily housing. Our zoning bylaws are deficient, and we want to align them with our housing production goals. But I don't even know if that will work.
I guess if we do go forward with a moratorium and it does get approved by the Attorney General's office, does it change any of the 40B plans that are already in action?
I don't know. I'd have to look at that as to whether the permits that they've received or whatever they have in hand, what impact that would have on it. I don't know the answer to that without looking at it. Yeah.
So we're talking about a moratorium if it works on just multifamily housing, correct? Are we talking about housing, single-family homes also?
My understanding is we were just looking at multifamily, not single family.
I just want that out there. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think something that we need to take into account is we actually put 2 buildings and 2 affordable housing complexes online during COVID where the world shut down, so we can say, what were you doing for 8 years? Well, we were doing what the state asked us to do, which was not have in-person meetings, not, people were very concerned about resources, being able to sustain even a tax base because we closed most of the businesses or we seriously curtailed operations for some. So I think I do certainly agree with Mr. Crane that we should go from the perspective that we have done the work, we just have not had, and our planning documents bear that out. So we've got a warrant article for a regional housing coordinator. The position has been unfilled due to a vacancy for some time. We have one town planner. We also need to look at the fact that, this takes a lot of resources, which actually council mentions copiously in his email or his letter, that, these things can cost upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there's that. We've been constrained for some time with finances. We've dealt with a pandemic, and yet we still brought online well over 100 units during a very trying time. So I think we need to also highlight those things, that we are not just standing still, nor have we been standing still. We had that plan despite not having a large staff. We updated the plan from 2017. Yes, many of the, strategies have remained the same, but we also have to take into account the pandemic and how that affected all operations. So that would be I would agree with Ms. Crane, we should be looking to try and get at least a year and find a way to evaluate these. Hopefully, we can have that regional housing coordinator online sometime in the very near future so that we can get some additional staff, and then we can also look for other grant items which actually are also identified in some of our planning documents. So perhaps we can get some additional help there. But that would be, our best approach. We need more people. I think a year is going to be hard, and we might have to have more than one special town meeting to get it done, so.
Madam Chair, can I ask another question? I'm not sure if I don't recall reviewing it here. There is a warrant article for a moratorium regarding 2 clauses in the Massachusetts Constitution. I think it's Article 6 and Article 7. Have you reviewed that language and whether that is, in your opinion, I'm not asking you to second guess or
No, I know that.
in your opinion, does that pass or would that pass the AG's sniff test?
We looked at, we looked for any case that would have any kind of a relationship between Article 6 and Article 7 of the Constitution with a 40B development issue, and there is none. And when you look at the 40, when you look at Article 6, I mean, it really zeroes in on issues of government doing good things for the common good, and that primarily was the focus of Article 6. So I don't think that would be a challenge to a moratorium issue successfully. I don't see it. And I think if there was any validity to it, it may have already been litigated, of course, and it would have been challenged at least by moratoriums drafted, presented to the Attorney General. And I know this just came up, and so but we did take a look at it as best we could, but we have found nothing that correlates those two and leads one to believe that a 40B is in of itself in violation of Article 6 or Article 7 of the Constitution.
Thank you.
Question, Madam Chair? So the town adopted the MBTA Act last year. What if, first, did Amherst, can you confirm if they were subject to that law also? And how would that impact our attempt for moratorium?
Amherst would not have been because it was, the MBTA Act came after their moratorium thing. I do talk about the moratorium, and I point out that, you know, I think you put yourself into a situation where, you know, that is an act that has an intent to encourage housing development. A moratorium obviously would be against that particular thing, so you might have a conflict there. And how that would react, I don't know. But that's a potential that I think we identified as being of concern to me, and I think of concern to the town, that's a very realistic possibility. I would just point out one thing on the moratorium language, just so everybody's clear. Article 26 of the present warrant says to see if the town meeting will vote to enact a moratorium. So it doesn't limit it to, and I think the gist of it was, from my looking at previous records and so forth, was that it would be multi-housing, but that it's not necessarily what's stated right now in Article 6, so that would have to be.
I believe that language was a placeholder pending
Yes.
this conversation.
It is.
Yeah.
Through the chair. So, Mr. Carpenter mentioned that COVID had an impact. We have 40B housing development going on. It's been going on for 5+ years. We don't know the impacts of that development. We know what they thought was going to impact us, but it still hasn't fully come online. And I think a lot of those assumptions have since changed going through COVID, coming out of COVID. Just knowing that the impacts that they propose their project with and what we're actually seeing, is that something, or is there validity to saying, let's delay or put a hold on future projects till we can fully understand the impact of this 300+ unit development, while we, instead of taking on a couple more 200 unit development?
Again, I think if that's a legitimate basis for the town to have a concern, then I think that can be expressed. And now whether that's going to pass the sniff test or not, we'll have to wait and see. But those are the types of preliminary, basic ABCs that I was talking about. These existed before. That's why we want to look at this now, and that's why we're looking for the moratorium. So if there's a history of this concern and that those issues rising up, then I think that they have to be identified and presented. The problem I have is the time you have a very, when does the warrant go to print? It's
The 14th.
so, I mean, it can be done, but somehow all of that would have to be put together into some kind of a moratorium language, some type of a format. I've given you some kind of a format that was followed in Millbury. We have other examples. I have other examples of formats that have been followed here. But all of that type of detail work that everybody has been talking about has to be identified, has to be articulated, has to be put down into some kind of a written form that then has to be put on the warrant and that's going to take some time.
So-
And I don't know whether it's feasible to get it done in time, or if this is an item that should go to a following town meeting, but that's not up for me, but.
So with many of the 40B items, we're not allowed to take into account what it does to the school system. On a moratorium, can we reference the impact that building is having on our schools? And would that be something that's favorable or something that
If it's
still-
been having an impact, I would take a look to see if the school argument has been made in terms of other moratoriums and see. But I would not hold back. If that's a legitimate argument that the town wants to present, then I would at least articulate it and see if there's some justification for where it comes from. Has it been represented by the school committee in any meetings? Has it been represented by school superintendent in terms of budget requests? Is there some basis for it? Yes, then that seems to make some sense.
I would just warn that as we're putting this together, if we're going to put this together, we really do not keep with the mantra that we were doing this because of 40B. Because that is going to, the AG is going to toss it out the window tomorrow and say that this is an end run around 40B. We really have to say multifamily housing, whether it's 40B or 40A, all of it has these, potentially has these impacts on our infrastructure or on our zoning, and that's why we're doing it. If we keep zeroing in only on 40Bs, this thing's going to, in my opinion, this thing's going to be dead on arrival.
Are there any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I haven't written a 15-page opinion in a long time, so
Well, thank you.
I apologize for the length. I will tell you,
I know, it was interesting.
as of last Friday, it was 22 pages, so you did get it. Thank you very much. ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we are moving along to 8D, a possible vote on town meeting warrant item, Article 26 regarding moratoriums.
What is the vote that you are looking for?
I think if we'd like to put it on to write something out to put on the warrant.
I would say that we should attempt, and again, I think we have the basis in the planning documents. And again, I agree with Mr. Crane that we've done the work. There have been delays, but they're not 100% of our making. And I think we also, should be clear that we've brought housing online during COVID in keeping with the housing production plan of 2017. So we certainly haven't been just, whiling away the hours.
So
Comment?
I agree that this is something we should do. My concern is, as our attorney just said, the timing, and trying to get the language done before this book has to be printed. My question, I guess, to the administration is it possible for the printed version to keep this placeholder and then us closer to town meeting, having the language sent to them? I know there are other town meetings that have done similar, where they keep a placeholder and then they provide amended language before town meeting begins, that's distributed. Because if this has to get done within the next week, I don't think we're going to have a good enough language done in the next week that gets printed, that gets voted on at town meeting, that will be favorably looked upon by the AG. I think we really need a very strong language and a strong case to go to the AG, and I just don't know if we have the time, if we're talking less than a week, to do it right now.
So your question is, can we keep the placeholder where it is and the night of town meeting have the actual language ready?
It could be a couple days before town meeting, we send it to the town meeting members in advance, because I know we want time for them to digest this.
Okay.
I just worry about trying to get this language done in such a short window. That's going to really have any chance of the AG blessing it.
Can I just add, I'm still here. The issue of putting out items on a warrant is to give a warning, to give notice to town meeting members. I have a real concern on a matter of this magnitude, whether to put a placeholder of generic language and then to present them with a proposal by way of a motion, or maybe even a few days older, whether that would be sufficient. I would have a problem saying that that was sufficient warning to the town meeting members that this was an item that was going to be before them. So to your question, Mr. Grant, I would say you'd have to either get the language done or look at doing it at a later date.
So this would be my question. We'd have to mail out the warrant, or it has to be in their hands 7 days ahead. We could use that extra time to create the language for the article and include that in the mailing.
Just as a separate piece of paper?
Yeah. And still fulfill our requirements of notification and obviously give town meeting members an opportunity to.
Can I ask logistically to the town manager, how does that happen? Does the printer mail out our warrant articles? Or do we mail them out ourselves and we could add something to it in that way?
So through the chair, right now, we are planning on sending it to the printer on the 14th. It will be back to us by the 18th. We'll be mailing it from our office on the 18th because the 21st is a holiday, and we anticipate a little bit of a delay because the pre-town meeting is the next week. So that's why the timeline is the way it is. If we hold off another week, there's a chance that the town meeting members will not have the packet for pre-town meeting.
So, do we think we realistically could draft a warrant article, a sufficient warrant article for the AG's office in 2 weeks? Like, that's kind of what it's boiling down to.
So we should have the information. It's putting it together. And again, we have the article in there, placeholder in there. We could update the placeholder to reflect what's going to be finalized without having the finalized language, as always, waiting for town council to review and make sure that it's in there. But if we have an outline of what needs to get put in there, I don't know that we can give them much more. And during town meeting, there always, the ability to amend continually happens. So I don't think we're hiding anything. I think we're providing the information we have at that time. And I think if we get it to them before town meeting and they can digest that, and then they can certainly have the discussions and may even offer, motions to amend it. So I think us having it and not being perfect still has the ability for town meeting to make a decision with as many facts as we can put in there. But we already know many of the concerns. Town planner's been dealing with a lot of these things. It's really just putting them into the warrant and a nice item to vote on, and then eventually we'll see where it lies.
Can I ask, since you are still here, what are the consequences of somebody complaining that we did not provide them enough information in time?
I'm always looking to minimize the arguments that someone can bring against the town. So to the extent you can minimize that by having it already in the warrant, ready to go, it minimizes that argument. It can be amended on town meeting floor, there's no question about that. But you're giving notice and a warning to town meeting members that this is the issue that's going to be discussed, and this is how we're going to present it. To the extent we can do that, I would encourage.
So the other issue is, if we don't get it, we can go on town meeting floor and we can ask town meeting to postpone it indefinitely. So we don't lose anything by keeping the placeholder. We gain 4 days to print 2 pieces of paper in the office. We're already stuffing the envelopes by the sounds of it. And we've certainly, in the past, had warrants that have had amendments or additional information with it. So as long as on the 18th, when we're stuffing the envelopes, we have the article, it's out the door on the 18th, it's going to them. So either it gets to them in 7 days on the 18th or it doesn't,
Okay, so just to clarify, so to send the warrant to print at the 14th without the detailed language, and on the 18th adding it to the top, I think that is a good plan, because then
And we can even
it
put
will
in
be-
there-
Yeah,
See addendum.
Yes.
And again, if for whatever reason it doesn't happen, we stand up on town meeting floor and we ask the town meeting members to postpone it indefinitely, or we ask them to carry it over to the special town meeting in the fall, which I don't think is too strong of a hill to climb. So, I think we need to do this. We're at a critical point with so much happening. People will look at the amounts of money that we're talking about potentially for consultants. Okay, well, the cost of inaction is costing us far more than what we're talking about. And I know we are not, sitting on a pot of money, but I think it's worth trying to do this.
Madam Chair, can I ask, just to complicate matters further for you? When is the next Board of Selectmen's meeting after tonight?
the 14th,
14th. And the 14th is the day it has to go to the printer?
yes.
Because if you're going to have language in here that's placeholder language, I would imagine it's going to be more than what's our placeholder
Correct.
language right That should be all voted on by the board, since the board is the petitioner of
That
the...
is correct.
So is there a way that the board could vote it that night and it still go to the printer on the 14th? or-
We are working on that now. I do have office staff who's willing to go after our meeting on the 14th, fill out the proper information, and get it to the printer, if I'm correct, right, Danielle?
Then that's what I would recommend, then you make sure that we can help you work on amending this.
Correct.
You'll have to work on the substantive issues involved, which we will obviously help you as you go along. But then when you come back on the 14th, you would vote what that language is. And then that would be then included and presented to the printer. So that would seem to work out in your time frame. Is that
Yes,
clear?
it does.
If we need to have a special meeting, we've already had 2 meetings this week, council, so we can certainly do it again.
We don't
Sorry, I
mind.
couldn't make one.
That wasn't directed at you. Actually, it wasn't directed at anybody. It was just a comment that we have the time, if we need to meet for a quick vote. I mean, we could literally meet before we all go to work in the morning, well, depending on where people are working, and have a meeting. So just to get the language out the door.
Madam Chair, we have 2 articles that are calling for a moratorium.
Yes, one is our article, and the
Right.
second one is a citizen's petition.
So they're both going to stay in?
I don't believe we can change citizens' petition.
Not inclined to offer any kind of a change to a citizen's petition in the letter that I'm asked to provide to town administration. I usually,
And I just want to confirm, we can't remove a citizen's petition. They have the right to go
Right,
once they
do
get
it.
those signatures. Yeah.
and I know you've asked some questions about, isn't this proper for special legislation or, all that? It is, but this is a citizen's petition that they've put on, and whether it's, I will address some issues in my letter to say this may not be proper, this may be, I'm trying to think of the one that I was looking at this afternoon where it sounded to me like the petitioner was trying to have town meeting do some administrative functions in terms of, working to get certain legislative actions. But that's the role of the executive branch. The legislative body, town meeting, is not going to get involved in all that. So there seems to be some of a mix-up between that. But having said that, the petitioner has gotten the 10 signatures. They've been certified. He's followed the statute law. My recommendation, obviously, would be that that gets put on the town meeting warrant and be dealt with at town meeting. But the town meeting is the legislative body. They'll deal with it however they want to do.
Hopefully, we have our article, and we can talk to the petitioner, and he can send a notice to town meeting and ask that that be postponed indefinitely. So I think the remedy to that potential confusion is getting our well-crafted, which will hopefully satisfy the resident as well, so that we can then move beyond.
So we do need to vote on whether we want to move forward with Article 26. I think I know what that answer is, but is there a motion?
I would make a motion that we move forward with Article 26, that we send the warrant as planned on the 14th, with or without the language. I would say that we should add to the warrant that is printed, if we do not have the language, addendum to follow, and we will deal with it either on the 14th, or we'll deal with it in a special meeting before the 18th, so that it can get out the door to the town meeting members.
Second.
All those, certainly, go ahead.
If I may just ask, I just want to make sure that we include that it's multifamily. I know currently in here it's a placeholder. Just want to make sure any language.
I think that's what on the 14th, we'll provide at least a modification to that language that Danielle has willingly, after our meeting. I promise it won't be at 10 PM. I won't ask that many questions. So put things on the agenda that you don't want me asking questions about, and that's the way to push it through. And then that will go to the printer.
Okay, just wanted that. Okay.
I can amend my motion to include that language, just that it's specifically aimed at multifamily, just so that it's clear in the minutes. if that is something Mr. Chambers would like. So I will make that amendment to my original motion, just to add that the purpose of the article is to have a moratorium on multifamily housing.
I continue my second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The chair is a yes as well. We do need to vote to send the warrant as it is right now to town council for review.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The chair is a yes as well. We are on number 9. There are no town manager items. We have no table items. We have no member items. Is there anyone signed up for the second public comment? Okay, there are no minutes at this time. We just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The chair is a yes as well. We are adjourned. Thank you.